Prime Minister Balewa is making an official visit to America at the invitation of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy.
Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, a land of rich cultural diversity, home to over 250 ethnic groups, each with its own unique history, language, and tradition. But this diversity, instead of becoming a source of unity and strength, has often been the root of deep political, economic, and social tension. Many years before the independence in 1960, the country has suffered a series of ethnic rivalries, regional distrust, and the struggle for power took center stage.
I am honored to welcome you and the distinguished members of your party to the United States.
Before 1960, the country's three major ethnic groups are the Hausa Fulanis in the north, the Yorubas in the southwest, and the Igbos in the southeast. These three ethnics had been long battling for who should be in control of the country, who should take over the national resources and political dominance. But there's a saying that goes, there's no smoke without a burning fire somewhere. You see, the fire were the colonial leaders, the British masters who colonized the country, the ones who said they gave us freedom. Meanwhile, they were still the one in control of the country's resources. The mischief, the chaos, the ethnic tensions, and political instability going on in the country at the time. Everything was created by the colonial leaders. They were the mastermind of it all. The colonial rules created division among the ethnic groups, all in the name of freedom. They favored some ethnic groups by giving them administrative roles in the country. Most of them were Hausa Fulanis, while they sidelined the Igbos and the Yorubas. The colonial rules appointed more people from the north, and they put them in charge. Meanwhile, some other ethnic groups were seen as less important. You see, this favorism in the colonial rules breeded hate and chaos. Since 1914, when Nigeria was amalgamated, until 1960, the year of independence. By the time independence came, ethnic intolerance was already a big problem, giving rooms for political instability. The Hausa man didn't want an Igbo man as the head of state. Likewise, an Igbo man didn't want to be ruled by a Hausa man. A Yoruba man would not tolerate the same thing. Now it became a big thing with negative impact on the country's progression at the time. Nigeria became a republic in October 1st, 1963, which was 30 years after gaining independence from the Britain in 1960. This marked the beginning of the First Republic and another beginning of ethnic and political tension within the people. Chaos that was inherited from the colonial rules that guided the country many years prior. At that point in 1963, ethnic unity was already hard to achieve. The colonial system of government had created division among the people. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was installed as the first ceremonial head of state. Tafawa Balewa was installed as the first prime minister. The regional premiers were Sir Ahmadu Bello, the premier of the northern region. Samuel Akintola was the premier of the western region. Michael Okpara was the premier of the eastern region. Though the First Republic was supposed to bring hope and peace among the people, but things didn't go as expected because the ethnic tension had become deep, complex, and steadily growing. It started to expose more of the dirty jobs that colonial rules had left behind. Political posts that were meant for national service was now seen as ethnic advantage and regional control of resources and power. It became so worse that a political chaos struck in the western region around 1965. This chaos was called Operation Wetie. It was a power struggle and confrontation between Obafemi Awolowo and Samuel Akintola. Riot and assassination broke out in the region. Supporters were burning themselves. The incident at the time earned the name Operation Wetie, which was a Yoruba slang meaning to wet with petrol and burn. Supporters of Akintola were burning Awolowo supporters. And to make matters worse, the federal government's inability to handle the situation resulted in the first military coup that happened barely a year after, in 1966.
Major MZ Ogbu, can you please give me an account of the night of the coup in Kaduna?
Well, it's rather...
After the chaos in the West, the military officers pushed to take over the country. They wanted to end the corruption, ethnic instability, and political violence which has taken over the First Republic. But the only way to carry out their plans was to eliminate the leaders, the ones who had been under the control of the colonial rules. So on January 15, 1966, a group of young officers including Major Chukwuma Nziogu, Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Major Don Okafor, Major Adewale Ademoyega, and some other young officers went out to attack the civilian leaders. It was the first ever coup at the time. Sir Ahmadu Bello was assassinated at his residence in Kaduna. Samuel Akintola was assassinated in his Ibadan residence. Tafawa Balewa and Okoti Yebo were both assassinated. Many more individuals were also assassinated in the same day. The military attack on the leaders led to the collapse of the Nigerian First Republic. The military coup weren't just about politics, they were deeply tied to ethnic and regional division. It was the beginning of the military rules and more of ethnic tension in Nigeria. Aguiyi-Ironsi, a man from the Igbo tribe, was installed as the new head of state under a military regime. At this point, the Northerners were going to seek revenge for the coup, as they claimed that most of their leaders were killed during the attack. They swore to take revenge on the Igbos, something that they would later achieve exactly 6 months after the first coup. On July 29, 1966, a counter-coup was launched, leading to Aguiyi-Ironsi's assassination by mostly young northern officers who took revenge for their leaders. The act breeded more ethnic tension, intolerance, and violence in the country. The Igbo community became a target. Ethnic tension was building against them. And in the midst of the chaos, Yakubu Gowon was installed as the new head of state. Apparently, Gowon was chosen because he was a neutral person, he was the most senior surviving officer acceptable to both the northern and the western. He was only 31 years old at the time, and he promised to unite the country by eliminating ethnic and political tension. So he was like a savior to the country. But barely few weeks into his tenure, the anti-Igbo massacre began in the northern region of Nigeria, especially in cities like Kano, Zaria, and Kaduna. Thousands of Igbo civilians living in the north were killed, and many more fled to their eastern region. It became apparent that the Northerners were not done on their revenge. Few more of the Igbos were also attacked in Lagos and other places. They had abandoned their properties and returned to their places in the eastern region. Though Gowon condemned the killing and tried to calm the country, but many of the Igbos felt it didn't do enough to stop the violence. The attack continued from August to October until in November 1966, when the military governor of the eastern region, Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu, took a bold step. He held a large meeting with traditional and political leaders and other key figures from the eastern region. This gathering was known as the Eastern Consultative Assembly, and it was aimed at breaking the Igbos away from Nigeria to create Biafra. Upon Gowon hearing the plan of Ojukwu, his government reached out to the eastern region for reconciliation, but all attempts to reach Ojukwu failed. Ojukwu refused to attend any meeting in Lagos, fearing for his safety. After weeks of trying to communicate, Ojukwu finally agreed to the meeting, but to be held on a neutral ground. So, Aburi in Ghana was the place of meeting, hosted by Ghana's president, Joseph Ankara. The meeting was tagged the Aburi Accord. But what happened in Aburi? In January 1967, Ojukwu and Gowon, along with the top military and regional leaders, met in Aburi, Ghana. They came to negotiate. The main agreement was that Nigeria would become a confederation, giving each region the ability to make decisions. It was seen as a win for Ojukwu at the time, as both parties agreed on this decision. But when Gowon returned to Nigeria, federal officials advised him to reject the key parts of the agreement, believing it would weaken the central authorities. Ojukwu in return publicly criticized Gowon and the federal government for not abiding by the agreement reached at Aburi in Ghana. He felt betrayed by the federal government, so Ojukwu began to solidify his position within the western region, preparing for the possibility of war against the federal government. And by April of 1967, Ojukwu started openly advocating for Biafran's independence. Finally, on May 30, 1967, after saying that the federal government under Gowon was not acting in good faith, Ojukwu declared the Republic of Biafra an independent nation. Following the declaration, both the federal government and Biafran forces began to mobilize military conflicts. By July 1967, a month after the declaration, the fight began. The Nigerian force launched a first attack on the Biafrans. They attacked Nsukka, a university town in the northwestern region of Biafra, near the border with the northern region. Nsukka was strategic because it was close to the north and serves as the gateway into the Biafran heartland. The Biafran military under Ojukwu's command fought back fearlessly and attempts to hold ground and defend its borders. The Nigerian army pushed further south after taking over Nsukka. In response, the Biafran troops launched a bold counterattack by invading the Midwest region on August 9, 1967. They took over Asaba, Warri, Benin, and finally Ore, trying to reach Lagos and force a quick end to the war. It seems as if the Biafrans were taken over, but they would later fail in the counterattack, and that was when the wars began for them. After the counterattack failed and Biafrans lost their ground in Ore, the war shifted into a long grinding conflict. The federal force slowly tightened their grip. They imposed a blockade on the Biafrans, cutting off supplies, particularly weapons, food, and medicine, in order to weaken the Biafran economically and militarily. The blockade led to the mass starvation in Biafra, especially by 1968 and 1969. An estimate of over 1 million people died, mostly civilians. Many of them were children who died from hunger and malnutrition, while Biafra suffered from blockade, famine, and bombing. The war soon became one-sided as Nigerian forces had more weapons, better plans, and support from powerful countries like Britain, who supplied Nigeria with ammunition and military training. The United States also provided humanitarian aid to Nigeria. Meanwhile, the Biafrans had little or no support from countries like France and Ivory Coast. But it wasn't enough for them to sustain. By 1969, the Biafran forces were falling apart. Their supplies lines were cut off. They were running out of bullets and weapons, with no other country to support them, except from France and Ivory Coast, and the support was unofficial. The final collapse of Biafra came when the Nigerian forces launched an attack on them in Warri in December 1969. The war was basically over at the time. By January 1970, they had been reduced to small enclave, starving and surrounded. The war came to an end on January 15, 1970, when General Philip Effiong announced the surrendering of the Biafrans. In the absence of Ojukwu, who had fled the country a few days prior, they surrendered to the Nigerian force after months of intense fighting. The phrase "no victory, no vanquished" was declared by General Yakubu Gowon the day the Nigerian Civil War officially ended. The announcement was made to promote reconciliation and reintegration. The war's conclusion didn't bring genuine reconciliation. Instead, the biased policies enacted by the Nigerian government ensured that the Igbos remained a second-class citizen. While Nigeria moved forward with its oil boom in 1970, the Igbo communities were excluded from this prosperity. The legacy of this marginalization continued to fuel tension in Nigeria today. The same significant cause that started the Civil War in 1960s are still alive in Nigerian governments today. Apparently, the war failed to bring unity, as the country still wallows in ethnic tension and political instability. This is to educate us on the benefit of unity and political stability at all levels. A united Nigeria where all citizens thrive together is essential for the nation's future success.